name is Yasmin and I'm one of the client financial managers in the Christchurch office at CES, and with me today is Steve Davey, here to talk about financial reports. So Steve, what is in the financial reports?
The financial reports that CES produce include an income and expenditure report, and we produce a summary report which is generally one page, and then following that we have the same information with more detail at general ledger code level, and that's showing the actual expenditure against the budget.
Okay, so we're actually reporting on the variance against the budget?
Largely, yes, yeah. And there's a couple of other reports in there that are also useful, because each report on its own, it doesn't really mean everything. You do need to see the various other reports as well to actually put everything into context. And the first one that follows that is the balance sheet, which shows the position of the company at that point in time. And we follow on from that with some schools with a cash flow, and others with all schools have what we call an uncommitted funds report.
What's that?
That's where we look at the school's position in terms of their funds at the moment. We project forward to the end of the year where the school might be at the end of the year.
And what's that based on?
It's based on, it's usually the school meeting budget for the remainder of the year. And with that figure, we also take off what the school's committed or ring-fenced, which sometimes are outside of the accounts.
So can you give me examples of what that will be?
That might be an example where the school want to set aside funds for a new bus, or it might be that they've underspent in the previous year, and they'll say we'll use these unspent funds in the following year, which obviously we can't put into the budget, but we're ring-fencing it to say these funds are still to be used. Okay,
so when we look at the accounts, what do we need to pay attention to the closest?
But the obvious thing is comparing to the budget, because that's something that the schools put a lot of effort into arriving at a budget, and so that's a plan. And although it shouldn't be a millstone around the school's neck, it should actually there should be a good reason if you depart from that. And so the first thing is to compare what you're doing against the budget, and we're not interested in the small ups and downs, because obviously there's always going to be changes or differences to the budget. But what we are interested in is where there are significant deviations from the budget, and if there are, if it's income, we need to understand is there a problem getting income if you're under budget for income, or does sometimes the school might have to do something like send an invoice out to someone. Other times, if there's expenses where the school may be underspending against the budget, that may not necessarily be a good thing, because it might be that the school's not doing what they're meant to be doing. Or if they're spending more than the budget, is that because their costs are out of control? So it's important to put the variance into context with what's happening in the school, and looking at the trend. How's the school trending? Because also some months you might have heavier months than other months. It could be quite lumpy. So through the year, so curriculum is a good example where you might have some one-off costs that are earlier in the year rather than regular through the year as the year goes through.
Okay, so if I've got cash in the bank, that's a good thing, right? We don't need to worry about anything?
It needs to be put into context as well, because if you've got cash, it may well be accounted for, particularly schools who've got a ministry project. You can have quite substantial funds coming from the ministry, but it's for a particular use. And so that's where we need the committed funds report and the balance sheet. We need to look at all this together. So you may well have a big cash balance, but if that's all spent on what it's not meant to be spent on, that could be a problem for the school.
Okay, so but if we've got a surplus, it's good, right? And and we don't want a deficit.
Yeah, sometimes there's a valid reason for a deficit, and that might be because you are spending funds from a previous year, and it's been planned for. But you don't, on balance, obviously, you don't want a deficit with no good reason, because that's not sustainable for a school if you continually run a deficit. But there can be circumstances where you will see a deficit with good reason, but it does need to be part of the overall plan, the overall budget, and the overall management of the school.
Okay, so how can CES help with all of that?
CES can help schools manage that monitoring of where they are at this point in time. Is there a problem? Are they on track? We can help interpret the financial information. We provide a commentary each month to the schools to sort of point out how the schools progressing with their finances, and pointing out any issues that the school's having, and also giving suggestions like if they're needing to improve their cash position in the long term, we can feed that sort of information through as well.
Cool. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining us. If you want any more information, you'll find it at the bottom of the screen. Thank you.